just on the edge of Dartmoor in Devon.
Oh wow, okay, we're
Yeah.
covered
Are you in
different
London?
parts. Normally I'm in London. I'm actually down on the south coast visiting my dad. So
Okay.
yeah, I think Diane's in Manchester, so we're good. Okay, we are
We
live.
are live. Excellent. Well, hello, lovely audience. Welcome to our Facebook Live event. I'm delighted to be with you here again. My name's Dr. Emese Hall. I'm one of the Facebook page experts. And this evening, it's really lovely to be joined by Matthew Sanders, who is the director of the Magic Lantern organisation. And if you've had a chance to look at the AD article that Matthew wrote for issue 32, you might have a little bit of an understanding of the scope of his organisation and the work they do. But we've got half an hour together now to really kind of learn more about all the exciting projects and work that Matthew and his colleagues do with children and other interested groups, all about art history and why it's so important. So Matthew, if I could hand over to you to give a little introduction, that'd be excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for inviting me to this. It's very exciting. Magic Lantern is an educational charity that runs interactive art history workshops in schools and other places. And it's got lots of aims, and it's always very hard to encapsulate very, very quickly. But the main thing I would say is that art history is often seen as a narrow subject. For me, it is the widest possible subject. It opens up so many different areas, not just subject-wise, but ways of learning. So it's an ideal subject to introduce at a primary level. I don't know if you just wanted an intro at this point, if you've got some follow-up, or if you want.
That's absolutely fine. I have a few little questions. So how long has Magic Lantern been running for as an organisation?
Magic Lantern's been going since 1994. I got involved in 2005, so I feel like I'm a newbie, but I realise that's getting on for a bit. And I started doing workshops then, and have been running the charity since 2010. And trying to expand through the country and also expand our repertoire as well. So to keep it relevant, have a diverse range of artists and artworks, things that children can relate to, but also as the curriculum constantly changes, we have to come up with new programs. When I started, the old art curriculum was still in place, a very detailed art curriculum, and more often than not, we were asked to tie in with that. These days, it's unlikely, sadly, maybe, that to be asked to do a standalone art workshop or history of art workshop. More often than not, it's tied into a particular subject or topic in the curriculum. So arts versatility in terms of cross-curricular learning comes into play then.
And what's the most common subject that it's linked to, if there's like a main one? Is that literacy or history or science?
I would say history, which is an obvious link. I get the feeling that having a visual impetus for history is really valuable for teachers, let alone the children. I think history is one of those slightly tricky subjects that unless you're steeped in it and it's one of your passion subjects, and it's hard for primary teachers to have that interest and knowledge in a detailed way in every single subject. History is clearly one that is often challenging. So having it brought to life through art, and art history covers, you name it, any period of history. So I'm trying to work out if I'm saying this because this is the most popular or because it's my favorite. Ancient Greeks is the one I think I've probably done more than any other. And there's great works from ancient Greece itself, but those stories have been told and retold throughout the subsequent centuries, and they just allow for drama and empathy, and the kids just love them. They're brilliant. But I've been asked to do climate change recently. There's always something, and like I said, there's nothing that art history can't tap into and enhance and illuminate.
Can I ask you a question connected to that topic of climate change? So what sort of works have you looked at with schools? Because obviously that's really topical in the media and it's a real kind of current issue. Has it been more contemporary works, or have you been able to look at some works from the past that kind of connect to that theme?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we try and show a range of artwork. So it's really important when we're tying into a topic, it's still got to have that range of art, because our underlying aim is still to introduce children to art and artists. So it would be boring, for want of another word, just to have very samey things all the way through. So I would often start with maybe things from the Industrial Revolution, the coal and steam trains and that kind of thing, factories. There's a painting, if we've got time, I've got a few things to show, some examples of how to do that. And one of them has lots of chimneys and factories. So it's not just talking about what climate change is, it's how we got to this situation, what's the background. I might use some contemporary work that addresses it directly. Maybe artists who use recycled plastic, things that have been washed up on the beach. So there's just a couple of examples, but there are so many ways you can take these things. The key thing is it's got to be relevant for the kids. It's got to be pitched to the right age group. And that's something we're always trying to find the right balance. So you've got to engage them for an hour in most cases, and find things for them to do. It's not a lecture. And I shouldn't say this, but I get bored listening to a one-way lecture. It's got to be a conversation, and it's need to get involved. When they're at the top of the school, when they're in sort of year 6, it often becomes discussions and very talky, and people come up with an idea and someone builds on that, and it really can become a really exciting thing where I'm really moderating more than anything else. With the other end, with nursery kids and those early years, every single work I show them has to have an opportunity for them to get up and do something physical. That's not going to be a surprise to anyone.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that exactly in my head, what that might look like. I would imagine even the older children are really gesticulating as they're discussing their points. The first big question I have prepared for you is, what is art history? Excuse me a moment. Excuse me. Have a small intruder. 2. Sorry, please go quickly. Go. Sorry, I just shut the door.
No, Mum was working.
We could have demonstrated how nursery children respond to adventure. I do apologise.
They could have been guinea pigs.
My big question for you is, why is art history important at primary school, in primary schools?
It's a really good question. It's a really big question. So and there are so many ways I could take this. So I'm really going to distill it just in the things that I feel are really important, that teachers have said to me. Visual literacy is the first thing, because it teaches you how to read an image. And yes, we're looking at famous works of art, but actually it could be any image. It could be an advert. It could be something on TV. It could be something on social media. And that links into why I think it's so important. Children are bombarded by images, I would say, more than ever. They're just constantly exposed to images, and that skill of knowing how to read them and analyze them and explore them, I think is a vital one. And it's not something that's taught as a standalone subject. So that to me it sort of is top of the list. But then critical thinking is also a vital skill and something that art can tap into. Children are often connecting what they see in images with either stuff they have been learning about or have learned about outside of school, or they can connect things to their own backgrounds, experiences, and you just see them like instantly perk up when they can recognize something. And the teachers, I can see them doing the same thing. They love seeing their children sort of making those connections. As I already said, it's also a brilliant way of enhancing the curriculum and just bringing it to life in a visual way. It doesn't replace other traditional ways of learning, but it goes hand in hand. I also think there's a problem in this country, maybe in lots of countries, where art, high art, as it's thought of, the art that's in museums and galleries, is seen as something that is for a particular type of person, and that's sort of perpetuated, really. I think if young children get an opportunity to be shown that they can do this, that actually anybody can look at art, enjoy it, understand it, get something out of it, it just becomes normal, and that's all it needs. And then, I meet lots of adults who find it hard to go to art galleries because it's a sort of slightly alien concept. And I'm sure there are things that I feel like that about, that I wasn't exposed to. It's like hearing opera for the first time, maybe. It's like, what on earth is this? One of my favorite things is going to schools over the years, and when they get to years, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, and I start the workshop, they're just into it straight away. I don't have to say, okay, this is how we look at a painting, this was made by an artist. They just know and accept. And I know they can now go to galleries and museums, maybe taking their grown-ups and telling them about, asking them questions. So I just think that if we're going to get rid of that elitism, you have to start early and give everybody an equal opportunity. And then the last thing I would say, and there's probably so many others that I'm not thinking of. The other thing, and again, probably more important than ever, is the well-being aspect. There is just something really important, just taking time to look at these images that have been created by artists. It's just good for the soul, isn't it? But just allowing children to do that and giving them permission to do that, not that they need permission.
Yeah, and what you're saying there reminds me, my literacy colleagues, when I'm teaching primary PTC trainees, talk about, certainly with picture books, the notion of windows and mirrors. So children want to be able to see themselves depicted and see familiar things, but also want to learn about other cultures and other people. And it's exactly the same with artworks, isn't it? Absolutely. That kind of connection that I recognize this, or this is entirely new and I'm learning something about it, or I'm intrigued.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. And that's why that mixture, that range of works is really important.
The second big question is, practically, how can primary art leads introduce art history? What would be some top tips for people?
Okay, well, a few tips just in general about how to introduce artworks. The biggest thing is it's about asking questions. Like with so many things, it's not always about the answers. It's what kind of questions you ask. If you put a work of art on the whiteboard, or you're in a gallery, I would advise not asking a very big question like, what's going on in this painting? Because the kids, they'll just come at it from all different angles. You'll get a muddle of questions, of answers, and I'm sure there'll be really good answers, but it won't be very focused. So if you're tying it in with the topic, then that's your way in. So if it's I don't know, you're doing something about weather or seasons, that would be your first question. If it was a landscape painting, what's the weather like? What's the season? And then the really important question is, how do you know? or why do you think this? You know, why do you think the artist chose to do this and not do this? And it's all those extra questions. So they've given an answer, but they have to then build on it and dig deeper and deeper and deeper, because there are so many things where you take something at face value, and then actually you start remembering that the artist has made a choice. So it's also about what did they leave out as much as what they put in. So that's kind of my biggest thing, is ask questions. I've already mentioned the next thing, which is pitching to the right group. There are some artworks that are perfect for any age group. You just have to sort of tweak the questioning. But there are some that particularly lend themselves well to younger kids, some to older kids. You know, some are really esoteric and you can get into big questions about, I don't know, race or gender or that, you know, that kind of thing that you might not want to do with Key Stage 1, for example. You know, and every class is different and every school. So I don't want to sort of say, it's really the teachers know their kids better than anyone, and so they will work out. But that pitching, and something else I've already said, show a range of artists. I think sometimes it's still the case that many art books for children, and older ones particularly, you'll look at them and they'll all be fantastic artists, and then you'll suddenly think, hang on, Renoir, Picasso, Leonardo, Van Gogh, something's up here. And I don't want to denigrate those artists, because they're all great artists for good reason. But as we know from pretty much every walk of life, history hasn't been very good for women, or in the West for anyone who wasn't white. So it's just important to I can't even say complete that picture, because it's a tough job, but to at least fill it out and to have a balance, and get rid of ideas that the artists have to be male and have to be white, and you know. So and it's not difficult these days to find artists from every walk of life, every background, every ethnicity. So that's really important. One important thing, and actually I studied art history at university, but even at that level, this was stressed to us, that the identification, i.e. the names and the dates, are really not that important. And I think there is this misconception that art history is about learning names and dates, learning a sort of encyclopedic knowledge of art. It's much more important to look at a work and work out what's going on. It's about observation. And it's lovely when children do start to get to know artists' names and recognize styles, and you know, it helps with the context and kind of creates a framework. But that is secondary to what's actually going on. And I much prefer a child tells me all about what they're seeing than knows who painted it.
Sure, that personal interpretation. And I guess, you know, as a teacher, that's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear them kind of parroting back facts, because that's not the rich kind of opportunity. Something, I'm sure you do it anyway, but just to direct viewers to look at your website and those great resources that you have online, where the artworks are linked to a whole series of possible areas of questioning to open up those discussions. And then you've got possible kind of responses once you've gathered the children's thoughts. I think that's a really brilliant collection of, you know, for anyone who is thinking, I've not really done much with this in the classroom before, I'm a little unsure. They're really great. Any one of those, I don't know how many there are, 20 or so, covering such a range of different styles and topics. They're just a really brilliant resource.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. We did, it won't surprise you to hear, we made them during lockdown. And I think when we realized that Zoom was a possibility, and we did some Zoom workshops, which was great. It's not the same as being in a room of kids, but there were plenty of schools that couldn't do Zoom. So that's why we created them. And those questions that you said, that hopefully gives a taste of how our workshops work. So you can recreate your own Magic Lantern workshop.
Thank
you. The other thing I was going to say is that I think people are very often nervous to go to art galleries if it's not something they've done all their life and it's not a sort of usual routine. And this can be teachers and parents. I think sometimes, well, I've spoken to quite a few parents who asked me for tips because they were nervous that they didn't know enough to go in there and tell their kids stuff. And I always say the same thing, which is, first of all, you don't need to know anything. You can see it, you know, it's all there to be seen. But more importantly, the kids will guide you. They will go to the paintings that jump out at them. Sometimes they happen to be the really famous ones, but very often they're not. And I remember when I went to the National Gallery as a kid, I would often look at a painting and it's not a famous artist, but it's obviously speaks to you in some way. So don't be afraid of going to galleries, because it's like I said, you don't need that factual knowledge, and it's, you know, you might want to read up afterwards and that adds something, of course, but it's
kind of secondary. Sure. Is there something you want to share with us, Matthew? You mentioned having
so I just a few paintings just to give a little taste of some practical things you can do, because it's not just asking questions. As I said, to keep children engaged, you need to give them a range of activities, and that's what we do in our workshops. So I was thinking, I don't know if you want to try this, anybody watching, but just things we can do with our bodies and our voices. One thing that comes up a lot is body language. We're all used to looking at portraits, and something that is just really important is to think about what are people telling us with their bodies, because kids are having photos taken or taking their own photos, selfies. I like to be old-fashioned and call them self-portraits, but they're doing selfies all the time, and instinctively they will strike a pose, and they're all used to that phrase. So it's, let's look at portraits, think about what that does. This is one I've been using recently. It's a fairly recent painting. That is not a usual angle for a portrait. What is this lady telling us by that stance? And so you show a portrait, and it's an obvious thing to get the children to emulate it, to stand up, to try and get that exact pose. It's fun, and there's a huge place for fun, and I'm really happy that it's fun. But actually it's more than that, because it gets them into character. It gets them into the characters' heads. And I will then maybe get some words. It's not just about the posing, but getting some really interesting vocabulary, confidence or pride or something, what comes from it. So you compare that to, this is one I love as well. I don't know. Oh, that last artist, if anyone's interested, is Claudette Johnson. This is going back quite a long time, 1600s. But which one of these three was the artist? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. That's not fair. You don't have to answer. This is for anybody. This is how I might ask children. One of these three painted this picture. Well, maybe in the past, people would have thought it was the man, but not only was it the woman, but she's telling us, look how she's pointing. So again, this idea of body language. In the past, it was far more normal for a woman to be the passive one, like her husband, being looked at, but not looking at us. She looks straight at us. This is unheard of. A woman artist hundreds of years ago, making a living. She supported the family. I'm not going to go into a lecture, as I said, but I just find that really interesting. So you've got a range of expressions and poses that the children can emulate and really get into that character. And it makes them think about their own body language. Whenever I talk to them about it, I notice they're all sitting slouched, as we all do, especially when they're sitting on the carpet. That's just sort of how they're sitting. And I say, okay, you're having your portrait painted now, you're really important. And suddenly they're all bolt upright and they get that. But, so we talk about royal portraits. That might lead on to a discussion about statues. And that can go off into a whole thing about, well, who deserves a statue? You know, taps into current debates on that subject. Should we have statues anymore? If you were going to be a statue, how would you pose? So it really gets them just thinking about so many different things. You know, so I think one of our jobs is trying to rein them in and not go off on too many tangents. I mean, this is the polar opposite. We're talking about confidence. This is Augustus John. This is a great one for kids. I would often show a think bubble with this one. You know, what are these girls thinking? They probably aren't being paid to do this. He's just asked people who work in his hotels to pose, and they don't look very happy about it, do they? They look bored. They look tired. So again, great chance for vocabulary, for whole thought processes. One I've been using recently to get away from portraits is this idea of empathy. And here's a painting that lots of people might know. And actually, when we were talking about climate change, it's probably one I would use when thinking about coal and industry and stuff. But it's by Turner, if you don't know this one. And I have used it for years and years. And one of the things I try and get across is how, when this was made, trains were brand new. And I expect that to be a big statement, but the children look at me like, okay, so what? Why couldn't people get a bus instead? And I was like, no, there weren't buses either. And so, well, couldn't they get in the car? No, they weren't. And, you know, and you realize actually the chronology and all that, why should they know all that at that age? And I was trying to really get the idea across of how shocking this would have been, both the actual train and the painting of the train. So I've come up with an idea, which is to forget about the train altogether. Imagine you're in the playground and an alien spaceship goes past. And when I say it like that, and I ask them to show me their reaction, show me with their face, show me their expression, and then to say the words that they're feeling right now. And then we relate it to this, and then they get it. Because I can't, it's sometimes really hard to explain something that's 200 years old or whatever, this concept, because we're so used to train, you know, the underground and everything else that's come since then. They don't believe that bicycles hadn't even been invented when trains came around. So really trying to get this idea, this sort of how modern, how revolutionary it was. So the alien spaceship idea is one I would recommend. I mean, I'm really just picking a few things. There's so many different things, but one that comes up, I'm sometimes asked to do maths in art. And I'm not a maths person, I can't pretend to be, but I love the challenge. But maths is so important in art, and I really like the opportunity to show that all subjects can link on. You know, art doesn't have to be this thing in a bubble. That artists in the past were often mathematicians, and the Renaissance, you know, they were the two things together. But it makes us think about composition. How do artists put a picture together? One thing I ask children to do is to get a piece of paper or get their little mini whiteboards that they've usually got and draw a straight line across the middle. And then you ask them to split it in two at any point along that line. It doesn't have to be halfway, anywhere they like, just to split it into two pieces. And then they hold them up. And almost every case, they've done that roughly 2/3 thing that we think about when we think of landscape painting like this. And it's what we naturally do when we take a photo of a view, isn't it? It's a sort of natural thing that some artists, like this one, this is Sura, would actually measure out to get that mathematical thing exactly right, the golden mean, if we're going to go into detail. But it's also something that people do without thinking. So it just makes us think about, well, what is what is aesthetically pleasing to people. What, you know, do we do these things because we plan it or because it's just looks right to everybody? And what happens when artists don't do that? So yeah, so that's maths and art. Tell me if you've got other questions, because
I was just going to say, this one also makes me think of, you know, an opportunity to count things, all the people, the boats, all the trees. There's so much going on, isn't there?
This one always goes down really well, actually. It's a bit of a favorite of mine in terms of if I'm in the National Gallery. It's just such a calming painting, and everyone is lost in their own thoughts. And so again, it's another good thought bubble one. And who is this boy calling to, if he's calling to someone? They'll always blindside you, and that's something I love as well. You have a few ideas about what you're going to get out of choosing a particular painting, and then a child will point something out that you have never thought of. And that's one of the great things about using art history with children. They don't have the preconceived ideas about it. They don't say what they think they should be saying about it. So they really will come up with fresh observations and ideas.
Yeah, it's authentic. Sorry, Matthew, I'm just pointing out we are over time now.
Oh my
goodness. If you've got yeah, where did the time go? If you have a kind of final thought to leave viewers with, or suggestion.
Well, as you've probably got the idea that, as I said, my opening thing was that it was a very big subject, that it's a very wide open subject. It's not this narrow thing that people think. So which is why time has just flown, because I feel I've only given a little taste, but I hope that taste is enough to show that there are so many directions you can take art in, and there's so many great images out there, and they're ours, you know, the ones that are in museums and galleries. We own them. They're our collection. The children should have ownership of them. So if anyone wants to know more, please go on our website, get in touch, and we'll always point you in the right direction for particular topics, particular images, or obviously it would be lovely to come into your schools as well.
Thank you so much, Matthew. It was really interesting talking to you, and I'm sure people have lots of inspiration there.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.